The camera zoomed in on Vice President JD Vance, just as he leaned forward, his hands clasped, his tone sharp but casual. AOC's education plan, he said, eyes narrowed, is academic activism dressed up in reform. It's all about headlines, not homework. The host chuckled, nodding. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit apartment in the Bronx, 16-year-old Luis flipped the channel. He'd just gotten home from school, a school where mold covered the ceilings, where they shared broken textbooks, and where his math teacher worked 2 extra jobs just to survive. Luis sat frozen, eyes fixed on the screen as Vance smirked. It's ideological, it's theater, Vance continued, just like her degree. Luis's jaw tightened. He knew who AOC was. She grew up blocks from where he lived now. She was them. If she couldn't fight for them without being mocked, who would? He turned to his mother, who was wiping tables at midnight just to afford his bus fare. "Mama," he whispered, voice cracking, "they don't even see us, do they?" "No, mijo," she said gently, "but she does." And across the nation, millions were about to witness why. 3 minutes later, AOC appeared live. No stage, no makeup team, no rehearsed smile, just her, standing in front of a chalkboard in a Bronx community center. "I want to talk directly to Vice President Vance," she began, her voice low but steady. "And more importantly, to every student who's ever sat in a freezing classroom with broken lights, outdated textbooks, or a teacher stretched to their limit." Luis sat straighter. AOC spoke of facts, how property taxes chained low-income schools to permanent disadvantage, how federal grants could bring equity, how her plan would cancel debt for teachers and nurses, people who served the nation every day but were drowning in bills. She didn't shout, she didn't insult, she taught. "I graduated cum laude from Boston University," she added calmly. "Economics, international relations, I know the numbers, and I've lived the reality." The moderator was speechless. There was no snarky comeback, no smirk to match. On social media, the clip exploded. "She didn't defend herself," one comment read. "She defended us." Luis wiped his eyes without meaning to. For the first time in a long time, someone wasn't speaking about them. Someone was finally speaking for them. 3 years ago, before AOC ever ran for Congress, she volunteered at an overcrowded Bronx elementary school. She helped hand out backpacks, sat in a broken plastic chair beside a girl named Nia, and asked, "Where's your desk?" Nia shrugged, "Don't got one." She was 7. Today, AOC remembered that moment as she stood before the nation. Some children go to schools with iPads in every classroom, others don't even have chairs. JD Vance hadn't mentioned that. He had numbers, charts, and labels. She had names, faces, memories burned into her. A teacher watching from Oklahoma posted a photo of her own supply closet, filled not by the district, but by her own paycheck. AOC just told the truth, every word. Meanwhile, the headlines turned. Not "Radical AOC's plan," but "The Bronx just gave America a reality check." Vance had thought he won with clever words, but clever never held a child's hand after school. Clever never bandaged a teacher's heart. As Chapter 3 ended, the country held its breath, because this wasn't about politics anymore. It was about a little girl with no desk, and a woman who never forgot. As cable news replayed JD Vance's words on loop, another story quietly unfolded in Philadelphia. Talia wiped sweat from her brow as she cleaned a hallway at Franklin Middle School. Her shift had started at 4 a.m., just like it always did. She was a school janitor and a single mother. Her daughter, Amira, was 12, gifted, quiet, dreamed of being a surgeon, but their school had no science lab. The last biology textbook was printed in 1998. The computers barely turned on. Talia caught a glimpse of the TV mounted in the teacher's lounge. Vance was still speaking, calling education reform ideological theater. Her heart broke. Theaters had lights, seats, air conditioning. Amira's classroom had mice. Later that night, they sat on their worn couch, eating dinner, when AOC appeared on the screen, calm, clear, determined. "She's fighting for us," Talia whispered, almost to herself. Amira looked up. Do you think she knows? Talia smiled softly. I think she remembers. And in millions of homes across America, mothers like her sat quietly, not clapping, not cheering, just nodding, because for once, someone powerful didn't sound far away. She sounded like one of them. By sunrise, the internet had split in two. On one side, Vance's smirk, clipped and shared by pundits who praised his tough stance. On the other, AOC, eyes fierce with compassion, walking through a rundown school building in her home district, explaining how systemic funding gaps suffocate student dreams. One clip vanished in hours. The other, it exploded. A teacher in rural Kansas stitched the video into a TikTok, showing her classroom's cracked whiteboard and broken heater. She just explained my entire life in 2 minutes. A retired principal from Mississippi tweeted, I didn't vote for her, but tonight I listened. Even high schoolers, ones who never watched the news, were resharing her words. We don't need more punishment in schools. We need more pencils. You can't test your way out of poverty. We are not preparing kids for the world. We're preparing them for disappointment. Backstage, JD Vance's aides scrambled. Polling shifted. AOC's segment had gone viral, not because it was loud, but because it was true. And in that truth, people felt seen. They weren't just watching politics anymore. They were watching hope fight back. On a quiet morning in the Bronx, Principal Torres watched the interview on his cracked tablet. He'd been Alexandria's high school principal. He remembered her, book in one hand, debate notes in the other, eyes full of questions no one could answer fast enough. He remembered the day she got into Boston University. She cried, then hugged every teacher in the hallway. Now she was on national television, standing in front of the world. Not to brag about her degrees, but to shine a light on students still stuck in the same broken desks she once sat in. Principal Torres picked up the phone. He called the local radio station and asked to be patched through. I just want to say, he began, voice rough with age, AOC isn't making this up. She lived it. I watched her fight through every single obstacle, not for applause, but for purpose. The host fell silent. So did the audience. She made it out, he said finally, but she never left us behind. That quote hit headlines within the hour, and for millions of kids wondering if anyone cared, that single sentence felt like a promise. Mrs. Daniels hadn't planned to be a teacher. She'd been a nurse for 12 years, until cancer took her husband, and student loans swallowed her savings. Teaching was supposed to be temporary. That was 6 years ago. Now she stood in a crumbling middle school in Gary, Indiana, holding back tears as she wrote lesson plans by hand. The printer was broken, again. Her class had no funding, and every week, another child dropped out or disappeared without warning. That night, she watched JD Vance on TV, confident, polished, dismissing education reform as academic theater. He spoke of test scores, rankings, substance. But then AOC came on, and everything stopped. Mrs. Daniels froze as AOC spoke directly to people like her, promising student debt relief, more funding for classrooms, and respect for teachers as essential workers. No one ever says that, she whispered. Not like that. She posted the clip on her teacher forum. Within hours, thousands of educators commented, I've never cried watching a politician before. She's not promising miracles, she's promising fairness. Finally, someone sees us. And for once, Mrs. Daniels didn't feel invisible. She felt included. The clip was played again the next morning, this time on a different network, a less political one, meant for just the facts. But even the neutral anchor paused as AOC's voice echoed. Public school students in Mississippi get $5,000 less per year than those in Connecticut. How is that not structural failure? Backstage, JD Vance scrolled through his phone. Headlines had changed. His team was unusually quiet. AOC educates the nation. Who's really putting kids first? From the Bronx, with facts. He tried to ignore it. He reminded himself she was just a congresswoman, just a talking point. But the damage was done. During a live follow-up interview, the host asked bluntly, "Mr. Vice President, do you believe AOC's plan lacks substance now?" He hesitated, smirked, then stopped. Millions were watching, and they weren't smirking back. He shifted in his seat. "Well, I think emotions shouldn't override strategy." But it was too late. In homes across America, parents shook their heads because they knew you don't fix a school by mocking the people trying to save it. And in that moment, even JD Vance seemed to realize he hadn't won. He'd underestimated a woman who never needed to raise her voice to lead. In a quiet suburb of Cleveland, 10-year-old Sam watched the debate from a fold-out chair. His mom was a teacher, his dad a school bus driver. He understood more than most kids his age. He saw the school cuts, the duct-taped chairs, the lunches that weren't enough. After AOC's segment aired, Sam did something he'd never done before. He wrote her a letter. "Dear AOC, my name is Sam. I go to a school where our computers don't work and the gym floods. I saw you on TV. You didn't yell. You just told the truth. My mom cried. She said no one's ever stood up for her before. Thank you for caring. I hope you don't stop. Your friend, Sam, age 10. He put it in an envelope. His mom added a stamp, hands shaking. That letter was one of 43,000 AOC received that week. Some were typed, most were handwritten. All were from people who finally saw themselves reflected, not in slogans, but in sincerity. And in every corner of the country, something rare happened. Hope stopped whispering and started roaring. Mrs. Ellen Garcia had taught 4th grade for 31 years in a rural corner of New Mexico. She had seen generations come and go, some thriving, many falling through cracks too wide to jump. She once taught reading using flashcards she made from cereal boxes. Her students shared tattered copies of Charlotte's Web. She patched broken desks with duct tape and prayer. But it was the last few years that had crushed her. Budget cuts, staff shortages, test after test after test. And now, national leaders dismissing everything she stood for as activism. The night of JD Vance's interview, Ellen barely reacted. She'd heard it all before. But when AOC appeared just minutes later, Ellen froze mid-step. "Teaching is not political. It is survival," AOC said. "And when teachers are forced to survive, children are forced to suffer." Ellen sat on the floor and wept. Not because she was weak, but because someone had finally said what she had been screaming in silence for decades. She called her grown daughter that night and said softly, "Someone finally understands." The next day, Ellen wore her old teacher's badge like armor. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. 3 nights later, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez held a surprise town hall in a forgotten gymnasium on the south side of Chicago. No fanfare, no podium, just folding chairs and a chalkboard. The room was packed. A mother stood up first. "My son has asthma. His school has mold. They told me to buy bleach spray." A retired teacher followed. "We lost 2 counselors. Now kids come to me crying, and I don't know how to help anymore." A young man, maybe 20, added, "I dropped out, not because I was lazy, but because I was hungry. Every day." AOC didn't interrupt. She just listened, eyes locked in, absorbing each word like oxygen. Then she stood, hands clasped together. "I don't have all the answers," she said. "But I have seen enough to know that ignoring this system is no longer an option. We are not broken. We are buried. And together we will dig ourselves out." People clapped. Then they cried. What JD Vance had called ideological theater now had names, faces, flesh. And in that echoing gym, a movement quietly roared to life. No camera crew needed. Truth doesn't need lights. It just needs ears willing to hear. In Detroit, snow had blanketed the streets overnight. Inside room 204 of Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary, Ms. Bell wrapped herself in 2 scarves and turned on the tiny space heater she wasn't supposed to have. 27 kids, one heater. No central heat in the building since November, but they came anyway, because Miss Bell showed up, because she loved them like her own. That afternoon, her students watched AOC's segment during free time. At first, they giggled, politicians were boring, but slowly they fell silent. Then Jamal, the smallest boy in the class, raised his hand. "Miss Bell," he whispered, "she's talking about us, right?" Bell's throat caught. She nodded. "Yes, baby, she is." Later that evening, she posted a photo of her bundled-up class with a caption, "They shiver, but they don't quit. That's the American classroom. Thank you, AOC, for finally saying it out loud." The photo went viral within hours, because it wasn't just a picture, it was a mirror. And across the country, people were beginning to ask, not, "Is AOC right?" but, "Why did it take so long for someone to care this much?" 12-year-old Naomi clutched her backpack as the school bus rattled through potholes in Jackson, Mississippi. She sat quietly in the back, headphones in, pretending the morning wasn't freezing. Again. Her gloves were her brother's. Her shoes had holes, but she kept her head up. That day, her social studies teacher played the AOC clip in class. It wasn't part of the lesson plan, but it was part of life. Naomi sat straighter as AOC's voice filled the room. "The zip code you're born in should not decide the quality of your education. It should never decide your worth." Something shifted in Naomi's chest. Later that day, on the bus ride home, she pulled out her phone and watched the video again and again. She didn't fully understand policy, but she understood pain, and she understood hope. She posted on her tiny social media account, "I go to one of those schools she talks about. I'm not broken. I'm just waiting for someone to help." The post got 84,000 shares in 2 days. For the first time, Naomi didn't feel like a statistic. She felt like a story being told. And that story was just beginning. In a glossy studio across the country, a billionaire education expert took to the airwaves. He criticized AOC's plan as fiscally irresponsible and emotionally driven. He had charts, graphs, Ivy League words. But then, an image went viral, not from a studio, but from a South Carolina classroom. A third grader named Malik had been photographed doing math on the floor. His desk had collapsed. There weren't any extras. The photo had a caption scribbled by the teacher, "We don't need another chart, we need chairs." The side-by-side images hit the internet like lightning. One showed power, the other showed pain, and people chose pain because it was real. AOC responded by resharing the photo with 3 words. "This is why." Within hours, donations poured into that school. Desks, coats, books. But something deeper happened too. America began seeing past the politics and into the people. And in that shift, JD Vance's smirk faded further into memory. Because the truth didn't need defending anymore. It had already stood up, broken desk and all. Marcus Reynolds stood behind the microphone at a town hall in Philadelphia. The room was quiet, waiting. He cleared his throat, then froze. In his arms was a photo of his daughter, Layla. She'd died 2 years earlier from a chronic illness worsened by environmental neglect in her underfunded school. Mold, dust, cold winters. She'd been 8. AOC stood just a few feet away, hands clasped, eyes full of sorrow. She didn't rush him. Marcus held the photo up with trembling hands. I just wanted to say thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "No one talks about these schools like they matter, but they matter. My baby mattered." AOC stepped forward and hugged him gently. No cameras, no speeches, just grief meeting grace. Later that night, she said during an interview, "When we lose a child to systemic neglect, that is not a tragedy, that is a failure, and we must name it." Marcus's story traveled across the country. Thousands of parents shared their pain. This wasn't about party lines anymore. It was about loss, about dignity, about remembering that behind every statistic is someone who never got a chance to grow up. At 9:03 a.m. the next morning, a video went viral, not of AOC or JD Vance, but of a tearful mother sitting on the edge of her son's hospital bed. Her name was Tanya. She lived in East St. Louis, Illinois, where the local school had no library and barely enough teachers. Her 12-year-old son, Deshaun, had collapsed from an untreated asthma condition, worsened by mold in the school walls. "We begged for help," Tanya said in the video. "But they said there was no funding, no nurse, no ventilation upgrades, no one cared. Until now. Until someone like AOC, decided to speak up." As Tanya clutched Deshaun's hand, she whispered, "We're not just numbers. We're not just districts. We're human beings. Our kids deserve to breathe." The raw emotion, the trembling in her voice, and the IV line in Deshaun's arm, it shattered the internet's defenses. People didn't just watch, they wept. That clip made its way into cable news, and suddenly it wasn't a political debate anymore. It was about children, mothers, futures. And for the first time, even critics were silent. Because this wasn't about left or right anymore. It was about right or wrong. Late that evening, Alexandria sat alone in her office. The lights were low. Her team had gone home. The halls of Congress were quiet. But her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "This is John from Ohio," a gravelly voice said. "I'm a retired teacher, voted Republican my whole life, never thought I'd call you." Alexandria didn't say a word. She just listened. "I watched your response. Then I watched that mother from St. Louis. I'm ashamed, not of my vote, but that I let it get this bad. I used to believe we were doing enough, but we're not. You're right, we've failed our kids." He paused, his voice shaking. "I just wanted you to know. I believe you now. Keep fighting." Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't cry because she felt triumphant. She cried because someone had finally seen what she'd been screaming for years. It wasn't about being right. It was about being heard. As she hung up, she looked out the window, the Capitol dome glowing in the distance, and whispered, "We're just getting started." That night, millions felt the same. A week later, Alexandria returned to the Bronx, her old elementary school. It still smelled like old paint and cafeteria bread, but the walls were warmer now, lined with murals of kids smiling, dreaming, learning. She stepped into Mrs. Alvarez's classroom. 30 second graders sat quietly, watching the congresswoman who had once walked the same hallways, worn the same uniform, eaten the same lunch. One little girl raised her hand. "Miss AOC, will we ever have new books?" Alexandria knelt down beside her. "Yes," she whispered. "You will. You deserve the best." The teacher cried. The children clapped. And outside, dozens of parents gathered, holding signs that didn't scream politics, just hope. Fund our future. Classrooms, not battlegrounds. Teach, don't tear down. And for the first time in a long time, the country listened. Because it wasn't about Alexandria or JD Vance. It was about that little girl, that broken system, that chance to dream. If this story touched your heart, even a little, please don't scroll away. Like this video, comment with a memory of your favorite teacher, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters. Together, let's build a country where every classroom waits with open arms, not empty hands.